I used to think love meant sacrifice, that the more you give, the more you prove you're loyal, that enduring the hard parts without complaint makes you a better partner. I learned the hard way that some people don't see love as something to nurture, they see it as something to control. My name is Marcus. I'm 31 years old, and up until a year ago, I was in a relationship that nearly broke me, not because of some explosive betrayal or dramatic incident, but because of a slow, calculated emotional erosion carried out by someone I thought I could trust. Her name was Leah. When we first met, I honestly thought she was perfect. Smart, beautiful, witty, she had this charm about her that pulled everyone in. She knew how to make you feel like the most important person in the room. I met her through mutual friends at a small get-together. We started talking and didn't stop for hours. For the first few months, everything was easy, fun, romantic. She cooked for me, left sweet notes in my apartment. She said all the right things, knew how to listen, and mirrored all my interests. It felt too good to be true. Because it was. Things started to change around month 4. At first, it was subtle. A passive-aggressive comment here, a strange silence there. I'd mention hanging out with a friend from work. She'd go quiet. I'd ask if everything was okay. She'd say, "It's fine." But the mood would be ruined. Then came the guilt trips. If I didn't respond to a text within 10 minutes, I'd get a wall of messages. "I guess you're too busy for me. You always make time for other people." "It's fine. I'm used to being an afterthought." At first, I tried to reassure her. I'd apologize even when I knew I hadn't done anything wrong. I thought maybe she was just insecure. Maybe if I loved her harder, she'd feel safe. That was my first mistake. She began pushing boundaries in small ways. She'd show up at my place unannounced. She'd accidentally read my private notes or go through my drawers, saying she was just curious. When I confronted her, she'd cry, full-on sobbing, and say things like, "I can't believe you think I'm crazy. I just love you so much." And somehow, I'd end up apologizing again. She knew exactly how to flip the script. I started feeling like I was walking on eggshells. Every decision I made, what to wear, who to text, how long to stay at work, felt like it needed her approval. If I disappointed her, there was hell to pay. But if I confronted her directly, she'd twist it into some form of emotional martyrdom. It was always, "I'm just trying to love you." Or, "I guess I'm just not good enough for you." She never yelled. She didn't need to. Her weapon was subtlety. Manipulation dressed up as vulnerability. There was one night that really stood out. I was out with my brother. We hadn't seen each other in months. I texted Leah earlier in the day, told her I'd be out for a few hours. She didn't reply. I figured she was busy. When I got home later that night, she was sitting on my doorstep. It was cold, almost midnight. She had her arms wrapped around her knees like she'd been waiting for hours. I rushed over, worried something had happened. She looked up at me, stone-faced, and said, "So this is what it feels like to be abandoned." I told her she knew I was out with my brother. I even offered to show her the texts. She ignored me, said I made her feel invisible, said she just wanted to see if I'd care enough to come home early. That night, she cried herself to sleep in my bed while I sat there questioning my sanity. Every time I tried to set a boundary, she'd find a way to make me feel like the bad guy. Every note turned into an argument. Every bit of independence I held onto became ammunition for her to use against me. And then, the isolation started. She didn't like my friends. Said they were toxic and didn't get us. She said my family was too judgmental, that they didn't respect our bond. Slowly, I stopped seeing them. Not because I agreed with her, but because it was easier than fighting about it every time. I didn't realize it then, but she was shrinking my world down until she was the only person inside it. That's how emotional manipulators work. Not through obvious control, but through a constant wearing down of your confidence. They chip away at your reality until theirs becomes the only one that matters. And I was too far in to see it clearly. I started having anxiety attacks, something I'd never experienced before. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, my heart racing, unable to breathe. I thought maybe I was just stressed. Maybe I was overthinking things. After all, she always made me feel like everything was my fault. But then, something shifted. It wasn't one big moment. It was a buildup of small cracks. I started journaling again, something I used to love but had stopped doing because she called it self-obsessed. I wrote down everything. Every time she made me feel crazy. Every time she twisted my words. Every time I apologized just to make the argument stop. And when I read it all back, it hit me. She wasn't insecure. She was controlling. She knew exactly what she was doing. And I was done. But I didn't want to just walk away. That would give her the final act. She'd spin it, play the victim again, maybe even twist it into a breakup she could use for sympathy. I didn't want to leave broken. I wanted her to see what she had done, to feel it. So I came up with a plan, something that would mirror her behavior, reflect it back at her. Not out of cruelty, but clarity, so she could finally see herself through someone else's eyes. I was going to fake a breakdown, a slow one, just like the one she had pushed me toward for over a year. And I was going to let her crack under the weight of her own manipulation. I started small, just like she did. Quiet changes, a little confusion, a little unpredictability. Nothing she could call out directly, just enough to unsettle her, make her question what was happening. The first week, I stopped reacting to her usual tactics. If she guilt-tripped me, I didn't apologize. I didn't argue. I just went silent, detached, like her words didn't land anymore. She noticed quickly. She asked me if something was wrong. I looked her in the eyes and said, I don't know. Nothing more. The next few days, I started forgetting things she told me intentionally. Like what time we were supposed to meet. What she asked me to pick up from the store. I'd say, I'm sorry, my head's been all over the place lately. She asked what I meant. I said I'd been feeling off. Maybe I'm just tired. Or overwhelmed. Or both. She started paying more attention. But not in the way a caring partner would. She was scanning me, trying to find out whether she was losing control. I'd zone out during conversations. Stare into space. Let awkward silences hang between us. When she asked what I was thinking, I'd shrug. One night, I looked at her and said, have you ever felt like you're not sure what's real anymore? That one got her. She asked me if I was okay, if I needed help. And I just smiled. Maybe. I began answering questions with questions. If she asked if I loved her, I'd reply, do you feel like I do? If she asked what I wanted to do for the weekend, I'd say, do you still want to spend time with me? She started to get agitated. Her usual moves, emotional pleas, subtle guilt, quiet gaslighting, they stopped working. Because I stopped giving her the emotional fuel she needed. She couldn't manipulate someone who wasn't responding. Then I escalated it. I started journaling in front of her again. I didn't explain why. Just opened a notebook and wrote whenever she spoke. She'd ask what I was doing. I'd say, just trying to understand what's happening to me. I left post-it notes around the apartment with half sentences on them. Don't forget what happened on Friday. You're not crazy. She says one thing, but it feels like something else. She found one in the kitchen and brought it to me, furious. What is this supposed to mean? I looked at her with a blank face and said, I don't know. I just write what I feel sometimes. She started spiraling. She began asking me where I was going, what I was doing, who I was talking to, like I was the one becoming secretive. She was projecting. I let her stew in it. Then I dropped the biggest weight. I told her I had scheduled a therapy appointment. She froze. She asked if it was about her. I smiled and said, everything feels connected right now. She didn't like that answer. Not at all. That night, she stayed up, pacing, crying, saying she felt like she was losing me, that I'd changed, that I wasn't myself anymore. And for the first time, I didn't comfort her. I just nodded. Maybe I'm just seeing things clearly now. That's when she broke pattern. She offered to go to therapy with me. She said she'd do anything to help me get back to who I used to be. I told her I didn't want to go back. That maybe the problem wasn't that I changed, but that I'd finally stopped pretending everything was fine. She didn't speak for a long time. She just stared at me, like she was trying to figure out whether she was still in control of the story. But she wasn't, because I wasn't reacting anymore. I was observing. That's what really scared her. She wasn't with a partner she could manipulate. She was with a mirror she couldn't look into. She started unraveling quickly after that. The more I stayed calm and vague, the more unstable she became. I wasn't giving her what she needed, the guilt, the tears, the need for reassurance. Without that, she couldn't play the role of the victim. She couldn't twist the narrative if I wasn't participating in the performance. Every time she asked, are we okay? I answered, I'm not sure what okay looks like anymore. Every time she said, I miss how we used to be, I replied, I think I just started seeing how we really were. She accused me of being manipulative, of playing games, of gaslighting her. I didn't argue. I just said, I'm sorry you feel that way. The same phrase she had used on me 100 times when I was hurting. Now she was on the receiving end of her own tactics, and it made her frantic. She couldn't control the conversation anymore. She couldn't reset the script. And the more she tried, the more tangled she became in the very web she had spent months spinning. One night, she showed up at my place in tears. She had called me 5 times in a row. I didn't answer. I was sitting in my living room with a cup of tea, reading an old journal. She knocked like the world was ending. When I opened the door, she pushed past me, sobbing. "You're scaring me," she said. "I don't know who you are anymore." I sat down on the couch, looked up at her, and said quietly, "Neither do I. But I know I don't want to be who I was when I was with you." That broke something in her. She dropped to her knees, holding on to my legs, crying harder than I'd ever seen. Not from pain, from panic. She was losing control completely. "I can be better," she whispered. "I'll do anything. Just tell me what to do. I love you." For a second, the old part of me, the part she had trained to respond to tears, to pain, to guilt, almost reached out, almost folded. But I didn't. Because I realized that wasn't love she was offering. It was desperation. She didn't want me. She wanted control of me. And that was over. I stood up. Calm. Steady. Clear. "I think we both know this isn't healthy. And it hasn't been for a long time." She looked up at me, broken. "Don't do this," she said. "You'll regret it." I shook my head. "No. The only thing I regret is letting it go on this long." I asked her to leave. She hesitated, then got up slowly, wiping her face, trying one last look of helplessness. I didn't flinch. She walked out. And for the first time in over a year, I felt like I could breathe again. Not because the room was empty, but because I was full of something she had taken piece by piece. Clarity. The days that followed were strange. Quiet, but not peaceful. The kind of quiet that feels like recovery after a surgery. You're out of danger, but you're still sore in places you didn't know could hurt. I kept expecting her to come back, to knock on my door again, to flood my phone with messages, voicemails, desperate apologies. But she didn't. And that silence told me everything. She knew it was over. Not because I said so, but because I didn't play. The game only worked if I gave her a reaction. And now, I was out of the arena. She couldn't reach me anymore. But while she was gone, the damage she left behind wasn't. I started noticing all the ways she had rewired me. How I'd second-guess even the simplest decisions. How I'd apologize when no one was even upset. How I felt guilty for being alone, for feeling peace, for not checking my phone every 10 minutes. That's what emotional abuse does, it lingers. Even when the abuser is gone, their voice stays in your head, disguised as your own. So I began undoing it. I went to therapy for real, not as part of a fake performance, but as someone finally ready to be honest. I told my therapist everything. The manipulation, the isolation, the subtle power plays, the way I had slowly disappeared while thinking I was being supportive. And the most painful part? Realizing that I had let it happen. Not because I was weak, but because I was loyal. Because I believed in love. Because I wanted to see the best in someone who never showed me their worst, not until they knew I was too deep in to leave easily. But I wasn't ashamed. I was awake now. I started reconnecting with friends I hadn't seen in months. Some of them were angry with me. Not because I disappeared, but because they knew. They saw what she was doing, but didn't know how to pull me out. One friend said, "I didn't recognize you when you were with her. You were so quiet. Always tense." I hadn't realized how much of myself I'd lost until people started reminding me who I used to be. And day by day, I began to come back. I took up writing again, not just journaling, but essays, reflections, little snapshots of my mind. I poured everything onto the page, trying to make sense of it all. I wasn't writing for revenge. I was writing for repair. Because what Leah took from me wasn't just my sense of freedom. It was my voice, my ability to trust my instincts, to believe that my feelings were valid even when someone else insisted they weren't. That takes time to rebuild. But I was doing it. I stopped blaming myself for falling into her trap. That's the thing no one tells you. Manipulators don't target the weak. They go after the strong, the empathetic, the ones who will bend until they break because they care. And once you know that, you stop seeing yourself as a victim. You start seeing yourself as someone who was tested and walked away wiser. Not broken, not bitter, but sharper. I began to feel something I hadn't felt in over a year, control. Not over someone else, over myself, my time, my energy, my peace, my joy. And I knew I'd never give that away so easily again. Months passed, and with every one of them, the memory of her faded, not in some dramatic way, but like a fog lifting from a road you didn't know you were lost on. I stopped checking for her name in my notifications. I stopped wondering if she'd come back, if she'd try to reach out, or if she'd finally understood what she'd done. Because the truth was, it didn't matter anymore. She could rewrite the story all she wanted in her head. Make herself the victim. Say I changed. say I was cruel, say whatever she needed to in order to avoid facing the truth. But I wasn't part of that story anymore. I had mine. And in my version, I wasn't the one who broke. I was the one who woke up. I started dating again eventually. Slowly. Carefully. I wasn't looking for someone to fill a space or fix something. I was whole again. And I was protecting that with everything I had. I remember sitting across from someone on a second date, listening to them talk about their family, their job, their hopes, and realizing I felt safe. Not excited. Not nervous. Safe. And that feeling, after everything I'd been through, meant more than I could explain. That was the real victory. Not leaving Leah. Not faking the breakdown. Not flipping the manipulation back on her. But building something inside myself that could no longer be dismantled by someone else's insecurity, control, or emotional chaos. I started sharing my story quietly at first. With friends. With coworkers. Then online. Not with anger, but with clarity. I wanted people to understand that emotional manipulation isn't always loud. It doesn't always come with bruises or screaming matches. Sometimes, it comes dressed as love. And if you don't know the signs, you might stay because you think the suffering means it's real. But love that costs you your peace, your identity, your freedom, that's not love. That's control. And if you've been there, if you're there now, I want you to know something. You're not weak. You're not stupid. You're not broken. You're human. And you're allowed to say enough. You're allowed to walk away without explaining yourself. You're allowed to protect your light, even if the person dimming it says they're doing it out of love. Because real love never asks you to shrink. It never makes you question your own mind. It never feeds off your confusion, or fear, or loyalty. Real love holds space for you to grow. And the sweetest revenge you'll ever know is waking up one day and realizing you're no longer afraid. You don't flinch at the thought of them. You don't rehearse arguments in your head. You don't wonder what you could have done differently. You're just free. And they don't get to take that from you ever again.